The first thing Maya Lawson noticed was the silence. It was a physical presence, a heavy blanket smothering the familiar sounds of the Montana wilderness. No chittering squirrels, no distant cry of a hawk, not even the whisper of wind through the dense canopy of ponderosa pines. It was as if someone had pressed mute on the world. She stood on the creaking wooden porch of the Black Elk Creek Ranger Station, a steaming mug of coffee cooling in her hand, and listened to the nothingness. It was the third Tuesday of September, and the air, which should have been crisp with the promise of autumn, was unnervingly still and warm. Her radio crackled to life, shattering the quiet. The voice was tinny, strained. "Base, this is Unit 12. You reading me, Maya?" Maya set her mug down on the rough-hewn railing and picked up the handset. "Go ahead, Dave. What's up?" Dave Henderson was a veteran ranger, a man who'd spent 40 years in these woods and had the weathered skin and calm demeanor to prove it. The tremor in his voice now was deeply wrong. "I'm out at the Miller site," he said, referring to a remote camping area deep in the national forest. "You need to get out here, and you need to call the sheriff." Maya's grip tightened on the handset. "What is it, Dave? Poachers? A fire?" A long pause, filled with static. "No, it's the Miller family. They're campers here. Everything's set up. Chairs around a cold fire pit, a half-played game of cards on the table inside." He took a shaky breath. "But there's no one here, Maya, and there's no sign of where they went." A missing family was serious, but it wasn't entirely unheard of. Hikers got lost. Sometimes people wandered off. But Dave's next words turned her blood to ice. "It's like they just vanished into thin air." "But that's not the worst part." His voice dropped to a whisper. "The dust around the camper, Maya. It's perfect. Not a footprint. Not a single one leading in or out." That was the hook, the detail that snagged in Maya's mind and refused to let go. A family doesn't just evaporate from a dusty campsite without leaving a trace. An hour later, she was bouncing down a rugged fire road in her Forest Service truck, the silence of the morning replaced by a low thrum of dread in her ears. The sheriff, a pragmatic man named Ed Collins, was on his way, but the station was a good 90 minutes from town. She found Dave sitting on the bumper of his truck, his face pale. He didn't speak, just gestured with a trembling hand towards the small, silver Airstream camper nestled in a clearing. The scene was exactly as he described. Eerily pristine. 2 camping chairs were positioned companionably near a ring of stones containing gray ash. A child's bright red toy truck lay on its side near the camper steps. The door to the camper was slightly ajar. Maya's training kicked in. She pulled on latex gloves and approached slowly, her eyes scanning the ground. The soil was a fine, dry powder, the kind that would record the lightest step. Dave was right. It was a perfect, unbroken expanse, like untouched snow. There were the tracks of a deer that had passed through earlier, Dave's own boot prints leading from his truck to the camper and back, and nothing else, no human footprints. It was as if the Miller family had been lowered into their chairs from the sky and then plucked back up again. She pushed the camper door open. The interior was neat, but frozen in a moment of interrupted life. A plastic plate with a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich sat on the small table. 3 mugs, one with cartoon dinosaurs, held the dregs of cold, hot chocolate. The game of cards Go Fish, by the looks of it, was laid out. 4 hands. Mom, Dad, a young boy, a younger girl. Maya's heart clenched. On the counter, a cell phone lay plugged into a portable charger, its screen dark. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Dead. But the charger's little light was on, indicating it had power. She unplugged the phone and plugged in her own. It began charging immediately. The phone hadn't died from a lack of power. It had been completely drained, somehow rendered inert. "Anything?" Dave asked from the doorway, his voice hollow. "Nothing that makes sense," Maya replied, her own voice sounding small. "Their wallets are here. Car keys. The dad's insulin is in the fridge." She pointed to a small, cooler bag. "They wouldn't have gone far without that." Sheriff Collins arrived with 2 deputies, their arrival breaking the oppressive stillness of the clearing. They were thorough, professional men, but Maya saw the same confusion and unease in their eyes. They set up a perimeter, took photographs, and scoured the area. They found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no drag marks, No tire tracks beyond Dave's and Maya's trucks. It was a perfect, impossible crime scene, if it was even a crime. The official search began that afternoon. Dozens of volunteers from the nearby town of Silver Creek fanned out through the woods. Helicopters thumped overhead. Scent dogs were brought in. But the dogs went crazy. They'd pick up a scent at the camper's steps, whine and circle, and then just stop, noses in the air, confused and agitated. It was as if the trail simply ended at the edge of the dust. By nightfall, the search was called off until morning. The story was already leaking out, a tantalizing mystery for the news channels. The vanishing at Black Elk Creek. Maya stayed behind with the sheriff, the camper now cordoned off with yellow tape that fluttered in a breeze that had finally picked up, sighing through the pines like a lament. "I don't like it, Maya," Colin said, lighting a cigarette. The glow illuminated the deep lines of worry on his face. "I've seen a lot of things. Accidents, suicides, even a murder or two. But this feels different." "Different how?" Maya asked, huddling in her jacket. The temperature had plummeted. "It feels deliberate, but not by human hands." He shook his head, embarrassed. "Forget I said that. I'm tired." But Maya couldn't forget it, because she felt it too. A sense of violation, not of the people, but of the very laws of nature. As they prepared to leave, her flashlight beam swept across the side of the silver camper. Something caught her eye. She moved closer. Etched into the metal, just below the window, were a series of lines. They were faint, as if made with a fingernail or a sharp stone. They weren't random scratches. They formed a pattern, a circle, and within it, a series of interconnected, spiraling lines that seemed to draw the eye inward towards a central point. It looked ancient, vaguely Celtic or Native American, but she didn't recognize it. "Sheriff," she called out, "look at this." Collins came over, squinting. "What the hell is that? Vandalism?" "I don't think so," Maya whispered. She ran her gloved finger over the lines. They felt cold, unnaturally so. "It wasn't here this afternoon. I'm sure of it." As she said the words, a sound echoed through the forest, a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated in her bones, a feeling of immense, silent pressure. It lasted for only a few seconds, then faded, leaving the night even quieter than before. Maya and the sheriff exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated fear. The mystery of the missing family had just deepened into something far more terrifying. The next day, the world descended on Black Elk Creek. News vans with satellite dishes clogged the narrow road leading to the forest. Reporters in too clean outdoor gear stood in front of the tree line, speaking in grave tones about the baffling disappearance. The FBI arrived, a pair of agents named Larson and Ishikawa, who were all sharp suits and sharper questions. They were dismissive of the superstitious details, the lack of footprints, the hum, the symbol. The wind probably wiped the tracks clean. Agent Larson, a man with a jawline like a granite cliff, declared, "The symbol is likely pre-existing damage. As for the sound, could be a distant generator, a military aircraft. Let's focus on the facts. Did the Millers have any debts? Any marital problems?" Maya bit her tongue. The wind doesn't selectively erase only human footprints while leaving a deer's delicate hoofprints perfectly intact. But she was a forest ranger, not a federal agent. Her role was now peripheral, relegated to guiding search parties and managing the growing circus of onlookers. The facts, however, refused to cooperate. The Millers were, by all accounts, a happy, ordinary family from Billings. No secrets, no enemies. Their bank accounts were untouched. The forensics team found no fingerprints in the camper besides those of the family. The dead phone was sent to a lab, but the initial report said the internal circuitry was fried, as if by a massive power surge, yet the exterior was undamaged. Frustrated and feeling a proprietary dread over her forest, Maya decided to do what she did best: walk the land. She went back to the basics, studying old maps and talking to people who knew the area better than any satellite image. She drove into the tiny, wind-scoured town of Silver Creek, population 387, and found her way to the local historical society, which was really just the cluttered back room of the town library. The librarian, an elderly woman named Agnes, with eyes like chips of flint, listened patiently as Maya explained her interest in the local history. carefully avoiding any mention of the disappearance. "People think this land is new," Agnes said, her voice raspy. "Just trees and mountains for the tourists. But it's old. It has memory." She led Maya to a cabinet filled with brittle, hand-drawn maps and settlers' diaries. "The Black Elk Creek area, that's always been a quiet place. Too quiet. The Blackfeet tribe, they used to call it the Listening Land. They avoided it, said the Ikspitsa lived there." "The What?" Maya asked, struggling with the pronunciation. "Ikspitcha." Agnes repeated slowly. "It translates roughly to the stillness that watches. They believed it wasn't a god or a spirit, but a condition of the land itself, a place where the barrier between worlds was thin. They said it would sometimes take things, animals, people, leave no trace, just a symbol scratched into a tree or a rock to mark where it happened." A cold knot tightened in Maya's stomach. A symbol? What did it look like? Agnes shuffled to a different drawer and pulled out a folder of tracings made from rock paintings and petroglyphs found in the area. She laid them out on the table. There were depictions of buffalo, of hunters, of spirals representing the Sunday. Then she pointed to one in the corner. It was a circle with a complex spiraling design inside. It was an exact match for the symbol on the camper. Maya's breath hitched. "Has anyone disappeared like this before? Recently?" Agnes's flinty eyes softened with a deep sadness. "Not recently, not for a long time, but my great-grandfather's diary talks about it. He was a trapper. In the winter of 1888, a whole mining camp up in those hills went silent. 8 men. When a supply party found them, the camp was intact. Stew still warm on the fire. But the men were gone. The only thing they found was that symbol carved into the central support post of the main cabin." She closed the folder. "The official story was a bear attack or a avalanche that left no debris. But we who've lived here generations, we know." Maya left the library with a head full of terrifying folklore and a conviction that the FBI was looking in all the wrong places. This wasn't a crime scene. It was a phenomenon. That evening, back at her lonely cabin on the edge of the forest, she pored over the notes she'd taken. The stillness that watches, the symbol, the hum. It all fit a pattern that defied logic. Her investigation was interrupted by a frantic knocking at her door. It was young Kyle, one of the seasonal rangers, his face ashen. "Maya, you need to come quick, to the search headquarters. It's Dave." Her heart plummeted. "What about Dave?" He just started screaming during the briefing, said they were all blind. Then he ran out. He stole a truck and just drove off into the forest, towards Black Elk Creek." Maya didn't hesitate. She grabbed her gear and her truck keys. Dave wasn't just a colleague. He was a friend. He knew something. The pressure, the weirdness, had broken something loose in him. She raced down the dark roads, her high beams cutting tunnels through the oppressive night. She knew where he was going. Not to the Miller campsite, but to a place he'd mentioned once, a place he'd found years ago and never reported because it gave him the creeps, an old abandoned fire watchtower on a ridge overlooking the entire valley. It took her an hour of brutal off-road driving to reach the base of the ridge. The stolen truck was there, parked haphazardly. The climb to the tower was steep and treacherous in the dark. The wooden structure, built in the 1920 seconds, was a skeletal silhouette against the starry sky. A light flickered from the cupola at the top. "Dave!" she yelled, her voice swallowed by the vastness. There was no answer. She climbed the creaking, rotting stairs, her hand on her service pistol, though she had no idea what she would need it for. She reached the top and pushed open the trapdoor. Dave was there, hunched over a small table, a battery-powered lantern casting long, dancing shadows. He was surrounded by maps, covered in frantic, hand-drawn circles and lines. He was muttering to himself. Not random, never random. A pattern, a frequency. It's tuning itself. "Dave," Maya said softly, stepping into the room. He spun around, his eyes wide, with a mixture of terror and feverish excitement. "Maya, you see it, don't you?" "You're the only one who sees." "See what, Dave? What's going on?" "The disappearances. They're not the first." He gestured wildly at the maps. "I've been cross-referencing old reports. Missing hikers, lost hunters, going back a century. They cluster. Right here." He stabbed a finger at a spot on the map centered on Black Elk Creek. And it's cyclical, every 30 to 40 years. A burst of activity, then silence. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The folklore. The 1,888 mining camp. Now the Millers. It was part of a cycle. What is it, Dave? What's doing this? I don't know, he cried, pulling at his hair. But I've been listening. With my old ham radio set up. There's a signal, Maya. A low-frequency hum. Just on the edge of hearing. It's been getting stronger since the Millers vanished. It's not a sound you hear with your ears. You feel it in your teeth. It's like a beacon or a lure. He pointed to a modified radio set on the table, its dials glowing. A pair of headphones lay next to it. I listened too long tonight. I heard voices, faint, like whispers from the bottom of a well. The Millers, the little girl. She was crying. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. This was madness. But it was a madness that explained the inexplicable. We have to tell the FBI, Dave. This is evidence. No, he shouted, grabbing her arm. His grip was like iron. They'll lock me up. They'll ignore it. You have to understand. It's happening again. The cycle is starting. It's hungry. His eyes darted towards the window, looking out over the dark sea of trees. It knows we're getting close. It's watching. As if on cue, the lantern flickered. The low hum returned, but this time it was louder, more focused. It seemed to be emanating from the forest directly below the tower. The very structure began to vibrate, a fine tremor that made the dust on the floor dance. Dave's face went slack with terror. He stumbled to the window. It's here. Maya joined him, looking down. The forest was pitch black, but then she saw it. A light, not a fire or a flashlight, but a soft, sickly green luminescence seeping up from the ground in a small clearing about 100 yards away. It pulsed in time with the hum, and in the center of that glow, she could just make out a shape, a dark, indistinct form that seemed to be coalescing from the shadows themselves. Then, a figure emerged from the tree line at the edge of the clearing. A man, stumbling, disoriented. It was one of the FBI agents, Agent Larson. He must have been part of a night search team. He stood at the edge of the glowing area, his hand to his ear, likely trying to call for backup. His radio would be dead, Maya thought with certainty. He took a step into the green light, as if drawn by an invisible force. What happened next was brief and horrifying. The green light intensified, swallowing him. There was no scream, no sound at all over the humming. It was like watching a film with the projector breaking. Agent Larson's form seemed to unravel. He stretched, distorted, and then collapsed inward upon himself, vanishing into the central point of the glow. The pulsating light flared once, brilliantly, and then snuffed out. The hum stopped. The silence rushed back in, more profound and terrifying than ever. Maya and Dave stood frozen, unable to process what they had just witnessed. It wasn't an abduction. It was an erasure. Dave finally spoke, his voice a dry rasp. You see? You see now? Maya could only nod, her mind reeling. The FBI wasn't just wrong. They were prey. And she and Dave were now the only ones who knew the true monstrous nature of the horror in the woods. The stillness that watches was no longer just a legend. It was awake, and it had just fed.